What's up, YouTube? This is the 82-0 podcast. So, Bob Lanier, rest in peace, born September 10th, 1948, and he just passed recently, May 10th, 2022. And I've been meaning to cover him for a while. He's one of my favorite players of the 70s and 80s, and one of the most underrated players of all time. So like I said, he was born September 10th, 1948. He was born in Buffalo, New York. He was the son of Robert Sr. and Nanette Lanier. Growing up, Lanier initially was rejected in his efforts to play basketball. When he tried to play for his grammar school team, Lanier was told by a coach that his feet, he wore a size 11 at the age of 11, were too large for him because he would stumble when he runs. Even though he was tall, his feet were just unproportionate. Because I think he was 6'5" by the time he was 11, if I remember right. And Lanier did make a varsity basketball squad in his sophomore year at Bennett High School because he was deemed to be too clumsy. During his junior year, he was encouraged to try out again by a new coach, Fred, who taught Lanier as a student in his biology class. Lanier tried out again and made the team. He averaged 21.5 points per game and was named to the All-City team as a junior. In his senior year, he averaged 25 points per game, and he was named to the All-Western New York State Honors. In both years, he led Bennett to a Buffalo City title. Lanier graduated in 1966. He was recruited by more than 100 universities. He chose St. Bonavart University, approximately an hour and a half away from where he played. And you gotta understand, during this time, with the college recruitment, a lot of players wanted to be closer to home, to their family and whatnot. And anyways, he was a 3-time Converse All-American selection from 1968 to 1970. As a senior in 1970, he led the St. Bonavart to the NCAA Final Four. Near the end of the regional championship game, he injured his knee in a collision with Villanova Chris Ford. It did not play in the St. Bonavart National semifinal loss to Jacksonville University. Now, it's kind of funny because he was playing the future ABA-NBA rival Artis Gilmore. And Artis played for Jacksonville University. Just a fact I wanted to put out there. So he had a pretty good college career. And in his final season in college, his sophomore season, he was named second team All-American behind Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So, he had a lot of good competition in his college era. But moving on past his collegiate career. So during this time, as we all know, there was an NBA and an ABA. And the ABA was kind of like the NBA, but not quite to the popularity. And we don't have anything like that today. Sure, there are G Leagues and whatnot, but there's nothing that's stealing big players. Imagine if there was a basketball league right now that took players like Damian Lillard or Steph Curry. So you got to understand, during this time when Bob Lanier was playing college ball, players would often jump to the ABA because the ABA would offer bigger contracts. Although a lot of times ABA teams weren't able to pay them. Like, they'd sign them to these massive contracts and then fold, or weren't able to provide what they said. And so the NBA was more stable. So he was the first overall pick in the NBA by the Detroit Pistons in the 1970 NBA draft. He was also a territorial pick by the New York Nets of the ABA in the 1970 draft. So he kind of had to choose what one he wanted to go with. And he was recovering from his knee surgery that I told you about in his final year in college. And he signed with the Pistons, who eagerly presented him as the NBA contract while he was in the hospital recovering from knee surgery. Lanier reported to the Pistons in training camp limping, in significant pain, and overweight from his long period of inactivity following the surgery. Lanier played while still recovering from surgery. He was named to the 1971 All-Rookie team, averaging 15.6 points per game, 8.1 rebounds, and he led the Pistons to a 45-37 record. But I wish I could really say that Detroit had good teams around him. They really didn't. He became a star for Detroit Pistons. His best teammate was Dave Bing. And that's really all you can say about these Pistons teams. By his sophomore year, he put up 25.7 points per game, 14.2 rebounds per game on 49% shooting. But the Pistons, they were abysmal. They only won 26 games. Like I said, Dave Bing was their second best player. He averaged 22 points per game. Jimmy Walker was probably their third best player. For anyone who doesn't know, that's Jalen Rose's dad. But these teams were dog shit, man. Yeah, he had some good rivalries with Wilt in the early days. He had some classic matchups. One of them that I want to talk about was in the 71-72 season. Although the Detroit Pistons themselves only won 26 games that year, and the Lakers were the best team in the league, the Lakers with Wilt Chamberlain, who won 69 games, there's a classic matchup I think people should know about. It was February 22nd, 1972. The Detroit Pistons defeated the Los Angeles Lakers in 2 overtimes, 135-134. Bob Lanier had 31 points, 22 rebounds, and Wilt Chamberlain had 30 points and 21 rebounds. So it was pretty close down to the wire, and it was actually a Bob Lanier game winner. So, there weren't very much to talk about in these early days with the Detroit Pistons. 73, they didn't make the playoffs either. 73, 74, they had their best season yet. They went 52-30. They lost in the first round. Yeah, Dave Bing and Bob Lanier were a good duo, but they couldn't win anything. And 75, they just they lose in the first round, only winning 40 games. 76, they missed the playoffs. They win 36 games, but losing early in the playoffs. So he didn't really have good teams around him. And he would play with Detroit up into the 79-80 season. And in Detroit, when his 10 seasons there, he'd average 22.7 points per game, 11.8 rebounds per game, and he would average 50% field goal shooting. And he always had pretty solid stat lines, like, for example, the 76-77 season, 25 points per game, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, 1 steal. So, he just couldn't have a good team around him. And on February 4th, 1980, the Detroit Pistons traded him to the Milwaukee Bucks for Kent Benson and a 1980 first-round draft pick, which would later become Larry Drew. Now, the Bucks, a lot of people, I know they won last year, but a lot of times people look at the Bucks as like this historic bad franchise because of the 2000s. That's not always the case, because starting out, they won pretty early, and in the 70s they were good. Up into the 80s they were pretty good, and he was a good player on those Bucks teams in the early 80s. They never won a championship. He would play there up into the 83-84 season. He had some pretty good teammates. Particularly in 83-84, he played with Sidney Moncrief, But that'd be the end of his career. He didn't have a lot of accolades. Didn't play on a lot of good teams. So I think that's part of the reason why he gets forgotten. But what I remember him for is how much he was referenced and how much he made appearances. He made a lot of commercial appearances back in the day. Because I used to like watching a lot of old games on YouTube, like where they would upload the game with commercial breaks in it. You know what I mean? And Bob Lanier would be in lots of commercials. He was in Pepsi commercials, Converse commercials, and a crazy fact about him, I don't know if he has the biggest feet in NBA history, but he wore size 22 shoes, and he was in a lot of Converse commercials. He had an endorsement from them. And he tried other ventures, like he tried coaching for a while. He was an assistant coach for the Golden State Warriors. I do believe there's a story I heard where he started a company called Bob Lanier Enterprises Incorporated. And it was a promotional marketing company which was a member of the Performa network. So he kind of got his foot in the door as a businessman. I heard he owned a lot of businesses in Detroit when he played there. He invested in steel, kind of like Dave Bean did. So from 2005 to 2022, Lanier was on the NBA Cares Global Ambassador. Lanier routinely worked with youth survey programs that support educational youth and family development and health-related causes. So he was an activist during the later part of his life. And getting back onto his references in pop culture, he wasn't just in commercials. He also made an appearance as a member of the Detroit team in the cult classic basketball film The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. A lot of people don't remember that. Kind of a low budget movie, but he was referenced in the 1980 movie Airplane. You know, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar plays that flight captain where he's trying to act like he's not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he's like, "Tell your old man to drag Bill Walton and Lanier up and down the court for 48 minutes." So he had some pretty good references. He was married and divorced twice. He had 5 children between his 2 wives. He had 7 grandchildren. Unfortunately, he had knee injuries that plagued him during the later part of his career too. And so that's why he retired pretty early. And even after in his retirement years as being a senior citizen, he still had knee injuries, still had knee pain. And he underwent several surgeries. The last one was in 2017. And at the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Michigan, visitors are able to compare the size of their foot to Lanier. The largest shoe ever created by a shoe company was size 22 for Lanier. In September 2018, Lanier shared one of his most memorable NBA memories. When I was still playing in Milwaukee, I was sitting at a gas station. I think I was at the Center at Saint. A guy came up to me and said, "My dad is sick, and you're his favorite player. Could you come up to the house and say hello to him? The house is right next door." So I went over and I went upstairs. The guy was laying there in his bed. His son said, "This is Bob." And he was like, "I know." And he just had a little smile and a twinkle in his eyes. And he grabbed my hand and squeezed it. And we said a little prayer. And about 2 weeks later, his dad had died. And I left a card in the Bucks office just saying, "Thank you for making one of my dad's final days into a good day." So that's a pretty incredible story that back in his playing day, you know, he got to be there for a fan of his in their final moments, you know. That's something that lasted him the rest of his life. Unfortunately, like I said, he passed on May 10th, 2022. From what I heard, it was from pneumonia. He had been hospitalized. So, rest in peace, Bob Lanier, Hall of Famer. Probably, I want to say, the 4th best center in the 70s. There was a lot of good centers back then. One of the most underrated players in NBA history. Rest in peace.